Hey everybody, it's Tuesday.
And welcome to this edition of Hook, Line, and Striker.
I'm Josh.
And I'm Emily. And we are excited to be here tonight with Patrick.
Hey guys.
Welcome to the show. So I guess, before I get a little bit ahead of myself, also welcome to the people at home. If anybody has any comments or questions or just things to add to the conversation as we go along, drop that in the comments, and we would love to talk about that as well. But otherwise, Patrick, for, maybe somebody who's never met you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I like to do a lot of bass fishing. That's pretty much 95% of my summer. I throw a lot of darts in the winter, but I also like going to some of the shows. I believe I saw you guys at Madison last year and didn't get a chance this year. Love working the St. Paul show and getting to talk to people there. And like we're talking for the show, I like to do a little trout fishing now. Been getting into that. Other than that, I don't know. I'm a bass head. I can accidentally catch walleyes here and there, though.
And remind us of your location. Like, where are you fishing at?
So I'm in Tomah, Wisconsin. I spend a lot of time fishing the Mississippi River out of La Crosse. Otherwise, some lakes around here we frequent. Lake Tomah in town is just a little one, but down the road we got Lake Redstone is a good size multi-species lake. There's a lot of crappie fishermen down in that area. And then we go north. I like fishing Menominee and Tanner area as well. But primarily the river is the hot destination around here.
That's awesome. And, it explains a little bit about a picture that I actually saw of you earlier this year. And I love this because this picture actually wasn't even a picture of you, I don't think, but you were fishing along the banks right where it was melted. And so that could very much be a lake. Sometimes people wouldn't go out such early open water or such late ice. I don't know if you can call it that. But if that was along the river, there's certainly a lot of opportunity for fish.
Oh, no, that was actually right here in town, just a couple blocks away from where I'm at. The ice melted probably like 30 feet back from shore, and I couldn't stand sitting around anymore. It was like 50 degrees. It was a wonderful night, so I walked out there with a jerk bait, and unfortunately didn't catch anything, but at least I got to go out, cast a couple times, so that made it all right.
Well, and, to be honest, that's exactly why I bring that up is because, in that instance, you went out and you did something that maybe other people wouldn't have done. And in this case, like you admitted, it wasn't a very fruitful evening, maybe just a whole lot of fun. But I think that's the thing is to be that person who catches fish, you have to try maybe things that you don't normally try.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Definitely got to get out of your comfort zone at time. And a big thing with bass fishing that I learned was we make all these waypoints on our units, and we can do this with any kind of fishing. We go to the certain stump and we just catch a pile of crappies one day, or we catch a 5-pound bass here, and then we just find ourselves tracking back to that waypoint all the time instead of listening to what the fish tell us that, hey, they're not living on this thing in the fall, And so getting out of your comfort zone in any type of fishing, I think, is a big deal, whether it be exploring new areas, trying new baits, new techniques. Just about any of that is a big deal, and it really adds into learning as an angler.
That's a really great point that you're bringing up because it's not just about being like daring, trying new bait or something, worrying about wasting your time, but it's about learning something. And I think that's a really great point because for every one of those times that you use something that you didn't before, every time that you don't catch something, there's probably a time where you do.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like jerk baits, for instance, I love fishing a jerk bait. I should probably keep one on the deck all year, but I really do it mainly in the spring. That and Clear Lake smallmouth is about the only time I do it, but I know there's other times it can be effective, but we get stuck in our ways sometimes. Yeah, that's kind of the worst thing for me when I should probably pick up something finessey or a drop shot, and I don't want to do it.
We definitely all get stuck in our ruts or stuck in being stubborn about, I know this, I hear myself doing that. I know Josh is laughing at me.
Well, and we have the exact opposite problem. You and I fish a lot of finesse. We fish a lot of finesse rods, a lot of finesse tackle. When there are instances we probably would do a little bit better if we fished a little bit little bit more power heavy, but that's just what we like.
That's true.
Yeah, and there's always going to be something biting somewhere on something. So throwing the tackle box around happens sometimes. You can either get stuck with that one bait all day that doesn't do anything, or you spend all day throwing everything but the sink at it and it still won't do anything for you.
Right.
Well, and you're talking about spring and you're talking about jerkbaits. So, what's your go-to? Do you have like a specific color? Do you have something?
I don't know that I necessarily have a specific color. A little bit of gold in there usually is what I like in the spring. If I can get close to a bluegill or a perch, that's what I prefer. I actually got one sitting out here, but the 13 Loco Special that came out this year, that's been a really fun bait. Kind of performs similar to other high-end ones without quite as bad of a price tag to them. The biggest pickup I think I had with jerk baits and the learning thing was on the sunny days using a translucent bait. So this one is almost a little see-through there on the bottom, whereas getting a full color bait on cloudy days seemed to do better for me.
See, this is actually really fascinating for us because we don't fish a lot of hard body baits for one, outside of trolling for walleyes, and we don't really use we don't really bass fish that much. So this is all really cool information, and I would have thought the opposite of that, for the color choices.
Yeah, and again, that's my own personal experience with it. It's not a hard set rule either, just like anything in fishing, it seems. But that's what I found out last year, and it was during we had a tournament on Big Green Lake, and I know I messaged you about that, trying to figure out why it was so dang dirty. So that was a really good example. I went there 2 years prior, and I could see beds in 16 to 18 feet of water, and it was awesome. Found a nice rock bar. It was smally heaven there for a while. And went back the next year, and fish memories. I went back to that rock bar, and it was just stained and dirty. And that jerkbait wasn't the ticket. And I had that thing glued in for 2 hours before I finally learned that they were not going to hit that in that mud.
Well, and that's actually an interesting thing to me that you're bringing up, Big Green Lake in Wisconsin, because to be honest, to the people local to that area, that's kind of a hot topic right now. So for people who are not familiar with Big Green, outside of Winnebago, it's one of the bigger bodies of water in the state. It's super deep. It's known for lake trout, but it's known for smallies, but it's known for, a whole bunch of things, because historically it has been a really fabulous fishery, if you can find them, because sometimes that's been tough. But lately, the water conditions have been changing drastically. I know that this is a very fresh topic. So if you even search for that, like on Google or, Ripon Commonwealth newspaper, I think had things on about it. But talk about an ecosystem that's changing very quickly. So, interesting that you're bringing it up, but that's a condition that different anglers, whether you're traveling to that area or whether you live local, that's something that you have to deal with for your conditions.
Yeah, I think it's as a local or someone even, half-hour drive, it'd be a little easier to deal with. It's definitely going to be hard finding. I would have a challenge finding smallmouth in that dirty water on that lake. I got some ideas of where they might go, but clean water, I think, would put them in a more predictable spot. And for me, I'm about hour 45 away, so I don't get a chance to go over there a lot. We might drop of the whim, go decide to fish that one weekend. And not knowing those current conditions, whether it's clear, whether it's muddy, that's a big deal for someone planning a trip that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and especially when the conditions are changing for the locals as well, that kind of throws everybody for a loop. And I hope some good things are in store for that lake. So we'll see what happens. I am interested in hearing a little bit more about fishing the Mississippi, though. Let's talk about those water conditions, because talk about something that can be changing. I know rivers are most likely muddy, but that's not every day.
No, not every day. Really, I didn't start fishing the Mississippi River until about 2.5 years ago, about the time I moved down here. And it was a real kick in the pants the first couple times out. I won't lie to you. It it was a difficult fishery not having river experience, but kind of picking up on some nuances on where fish stage and why definitely helped. But yeah, that's one of those. We get a big rain and it can muddy up the water. I mean, you got spots that look just like chocolate milk. It's bad. Not that it's clean water outside of there, but there's big eelgrass flats, so it's kind of cool too. You'll see just chocolate milk all the way down, and as soon as it hits this flat of the eelgrass, the backside of it's crystal clear gin water, and you can see everything. I haven't seen too many occasions where super muddy water will totally shut them off, but for the most part, it's not that bad when it does hit. Definitely a challenge. I like to pull up a little bit, pull to some shallower structure. But the other real condition that changes there all the time is how much those pool levels fluctuate. So you could go out on pool 8, and I believe average pool is around 8 foot, according to their datum on the website. You can go out there on a Friday, it'll be 8 foot. All of a sudden, we get all this rain, and 7 days later, it could jump up to 9, 10 feet flood conditions. So keeping track of those in terms of, again, we go back to these fishing memories things and fishing our waypoints. We almost have a list of, okay, pool is at 10 foot. We can go fish this spot, this spot, this spot, or these similar spots to this, but all of a sudden it drops out to 6 foot. Well, half our spots are now dry land by a mile. So that makes it another challenging aspect to it. That and learning where you can and can't drive your boat.
You say that like you learned that the hard way.
I didn't get totally stuck, but we had some close calls.
Well, and I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to. So hopefully a good outcome. But
even you, the first year we had our boat, you locked us on the sandbar.
Oh my goodness!
Granted, I was driving.
Not even. Oh my goodness. But that's a really great point that I was actually going to connect back to what Patrick said, not to change topics because not really, but you were talking about learning to fish the river, and that is really something that a lot of people do struggle with and have to learn. So, sandbanks, where the deep spots are, where the current is strongest, all of those things. But like you're saying, in order to be a good bass angler in this case, where is the water muddy versus not, and kind of learning those nuances. One of the most unfortunate things about that is sometimes you just have to go and see it and learn it. Some things you can't necessarily be told, and time on the water cannot be replaced by anything.
No, that is definitely true. And like we talked earlier about, we might have bad days of fishing. I especially see this in our practice or tournaments a lot. We've gone out up north and spent 10 hours and caught one fish that was 10 inches long, and we're just spinning our brain trying to figure out what we did wrong, where we need to go. But not catching fish is going to teach you something too. It'll tell you that the conditions weren't right, your bait wasn't right, or you were in the wrong spot. So there's always learning to be had.
Yeah, that's for sure. And kind of back to things that do work. You were talking about jerk baits in spring. What about after spring?
That's kind of a tough one. It depends on spring. We more so look at it in the spawning stages. But after we hit that spawn, that post-spawn deal, I pick up a Senko a lot, and a Ned rig. And those are two finesse baits and patience things that are hard to come by for a while. Normally, if you see me with a spinning rod in hand, it's not a good thing.
Oh my goodness, that's really funny. And do you have any awesome trips or anything planned this year? What is your spring and summer outlook looking like?
So we actually dialed back on the tournaments a little bit this year, just so I fished with one guy for all these team events, and last year I think we did 14 or 15, and it just got to be a little much with pre-fishing and everything. So we dialed that back to 6. At the end of the month here, I'll actually be headed up to Long Lake Chautauqua up by Birchwood. We'll pre-fish that for a tournament we got in the middle of May, and then some outings on the river. Hopefully going to get over to Big Green for a team tournament. We'll see how that pans out. I think that was the only other. And then the fall, we've got up by Birchwood again, another tournament on Long Lake, and that was one of those where we practiced and it wasn't good. And yeah, we went out the day before the tournament and we found a big rock flat kind of with a sharp drop on this point. So we started fishing that, got a couple fish, decided to leave it. And we went there the next morning and I think we threw spinner baits, lipless, A-rig, crankbaits, jigs, Texas rigs, Carolina rigs, basically you name it. And we caught like one fish on there and just kept seeing them all over. And we went down, and this is where I hated to do it, but I looked at my partner and I go, I'm just going to have to pull out the Fish Catcher 9000 and got my little Ned rig out. And I kept that boat planted on a rock bar for 7 hours to get 13 pounds of smallmouth or something. It made a tough day.
Oh my goodness. But persistence pays off, and trying everything in your tackle box can be frustrating, but also kind of fun. So there's that.
Depends on the day.
Depends on the day, yeah. That's for sure. Not to switch topics, but the other thing that you mentioned earlier is trout fishing. And that is something that's super interesting to a lot of people, or fishing the little streams. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that was new to me in the last couple of years. I had never done it, and I had a buddy hit me up one Saturday, wanted to go for opener, so I was okay. Yeah, I'll hop in the truck at 3:30. It's no different than going bass fishing. And we did the worm, just worms and slip sinkers on there, and some deep holes, and did all right with that. And I had another buddy get me hooked on Rapalas, and so we the little F5 Rapala, we do pretty well with those, and south of Toma, around the Toma area, there's just a ton of trout streams. It's crazy when you start looking at the maps available. And we'll spend a Saturday just driving around, hopping from spot to spot, trying to find some deep holes, spend 15, 20 minutes, see if we can catch a couple, and off to the next one.
That's interesting. With the bass, we were talking about, having to put in some time, finding those locations and all of that. And this is oddly similar for this, because this is one of those instances where people always want to go online, social media, and be like, where are the fish at? But especially trout fishermen, I think that they are a little bit private in, some of their ways. I'm not going to overgeneralize, because certainly not everybody is like that. But especially when there's a little honey hole somewhere, people are not very willing to share that. And, kind of for a good reason, because you have to find that. But it takes a lot of time.
Oh, it definitely does. And I think it's a little easier with trout fishing because you can back yourself up to some woods a lot of times. A lot of the creeks around here, at least, they're all in wooded areas for the most part. So it's pretty easy to hide where you are with that. As opposed to bass fishing, trying to find a spot on the lake that someone isn't going to pick out. Hey, there's that cell phone tower over there. So there's a lot of driving around and finding there. And just like bass fishing, there's a lot of, I won't say unfishable, but unproductive water. So yeah, you spend time scouting out all these bridges. Normally there's a lot of holes around those. Any of the creek bends and stuff you can normally find. So similar to fishing bass in the river, you find some deep water that fish can hide out in and ambush, any current break, any current slipstream in there. So there's a lot of crossover similarities between the two, which is interesting.
That is really interesting. We have some trout streams around by us, and I got to say, you're talking about the deep holes. The other thing that we really look for is where the grass really bends over, when they have places to hide. That really can be a lot of work to cast at, especially if you're talking about working around trees and stuff.
Oh, for sure. That's where, different than any bass setup I have, is a 4.5 to 5 foot spinning rod for trout seems to be the ticket for me, because you get that short little rod in there and you can get under trees and under grass, and you don't got a lot of room to work with, but that seems to be the ticket. And anywhere from 4 to 8 pound line, depending on what we're fishing. But that little ultralight 4.5, 5 footer seems to do well, especially when you get under bridges and whatnot. I'd like to pick up fly fishing. I don't know where I'd do it, but I think that'd be another interesting aspect to trout fishing around here.
So if anybody at home or anybody watching knows anything about fly fishing, hit us up. Patrick wants to learn, and me too. So let's get that going.
Make a party out of it.
But I think you're making a great point, because a lot of times people think trout and they think that you have to be a fly fisherman. So although that is a super fun skill, and I think that you and I should still do that, maybe separately or maybe together, it's okay either way. But that is the thing is, you can use, a rod that you have, an ultralight that you already have for panfish. But the other thing that people get caught up on is, what do you use to actually catch them? So what's on the end of your line?
So I got one here. Let me pull it out of the package real quick. But like I mentioned, a tiny little Rapala has been my favorite thing. It doesn't seem to get as many bites, but it does get bigger bites. So this is just a 2-inch F5. This is a kind of a trout pattern. I just got these the other day. I was walking through Walmart, and of course it caught my eye. But any black and chrome or gold minnow pattern seems to do well. Even the perch. That's primarily what I'm using. I know Josh beforehand gave me a tip on another one to try, so I'll have to get that out as well.
Yeah, the small little X wraps are really nice. The suspending jerk baits, and it's really kind of similar to the bass fishing, only really small. And
yes,
like Emily said, we around us we have a lot of woods, but we also have some open pasture areas, and so we do get a lot of reed canary that overhangs, and stuff that a lot of fishing books will kind of gloss over is these long straightaways that are sand, and it's super barren, but you don't want to look those over when you're able to cast, because you can work a long stretch of stream, and even though there's not much there, a lot of times bigger fish will hang out on the edge of those areas because there's not much there. And so anything coming down that chute, that's where those big fish will jump out and then scoop back into the grass. And Emily it was funny because she was testing out a jig or a spinner like right in front of us, and it was chocolate milk. Like it had we were going out fishing, and then all of a sudden there was a tornado warning,
literally,
and it rained almost an inch in less than an hour. And we're like, well, we're already up here, so we're gonna go up there. And then so we're up to our chest in water, and we're walking down the straight. And it's chocolate milk, and she's testing out this little jig with a spinner on it right in front of me. I wonder
how this swims.
And I, for my work, like I electroshock trout and do a bunch of that. And this fish, its head was as big as my fist, and so that's probably around 20-inch brown. That's in a stream probably 10 feet wide, and it came right between us. Like it didn't even know we were there chasing that spinner, and missed.
And it both missed. That's the thing, is like it tried to eat my bait and it missed. And I jumped because we hadn't seen a fish yet that day, not even a creek chub. And it's like, forget this. I'm testing my lure. And that's when you see the fish. It's like
we ended up with a couple little trout under some snags, but it wasn't a very productive day. Not like what we had thought, but it was, don't overlook any water, especially if you get off the road a little bit, because there's fish everywhere.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you got any sort of grass hanging over that can keep them in shade and make them think that they're hidden, and they'll sneak out there real quick.
Mm-hmm.
And then do you eat them or do you let them go?
We keep a couple to eat, but not many.
Yeah.
It's like about 2 fish per person is most that I want to do.
Yeah,
I agree.
And that's a really great point, because a lot of times people have little tiny local waters that are stocked all the time every year, and some people even swear that only a quarter of the year it's stocked because the rest of the year it's fished out. You never know. But a lot of these little streams, these are natural and native fish. This is not fish that people are leaving behind. And so being kind to that resource and releasing some of those fish is a huge part of being a sportsman.
For sure. I believe some of the ones around here are actually stocked, but that's where we'll end up catching a bunch of 8-9-inch fish. And we can keep it. And those ones, those all go back unless it's gotten the gill or something. It's not going to make it. Then, we'll take it with us. Not quite happy about it, but there's a lot of 8 and 9-inch fish. We try and get over the 12, 13 mark if we're going to have some for a snack later in the afternoon. But I agree with you, keeping that resource and having that there. It's such a fun time, and it's also a very simple fishing though for the most part. It doesn't take a whole lot to go trout fishing. I mean, you don't need waders, you don't need a lot of tackle, you don't need a $400 rod and reel. I mean, you can go out and get yourself a $20 combo from Walmart and a $5 little Rapala and just go walk and go fish. And like I said, it's an easy thing to do too if you wanted to bring your kids with or any other family that's not big into fishing as well. So that's another reason that I really am getting more into the trout fishing and like that.
Well, and another great point there is you can go out just with your rod and your line and just a hook and a worm. You know, like you're going to catch maybe a bunch of extra creek chubs. You know, it's not all going to be amazing, awesome trout, you know, but I think that's part of the fun and part of the experience, especially if you're going out with a family.
Oh, that's exactly it. Anytime you can just go out and catch fish is a great experience.
Well, and just like the other week, we were talking with our teammate Chris Emery, and we were talking about shallow water doing like bobbers and flies. I think Sharon actually brought that up, and that's something that you can do for trout too. Because a lot of times you're casting upriver and letting it float back to you, and then if you don't catch anything after a couple of casts, you move up to the next section and you walk upstream, so you're not disturbing a bunch of sediment, you know. And if you have a little clear bobber, you can put, 18 inches of line and a little popper will work, because anything that looks like a bug, and you'll get a lot of action, and that's really fun for kids to be able to see that fish come up and hit that.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. So, as far as all of these fishing adventures, one of the things about trout fishing is, kind of being in nature, maybe a little bit more immersed than what you are on your boat. If that's walking the banks, if that's actually walking through the stream. And a little shout out, be safe around ticks, check yourself, wear appropriate, can I call it bug spray or different protective layers? Because that is something that really can set you back as a sportsman to struggle with things like Lyme's disease. So shout out to, just all those different people out there that might be struggling with that, and keep you out there good and strong. But the other thing is certainly things like sun protection. And I happen to notice, I'm pointing at you both this way as if you're in the same room. I know you're not, but you and Josh actually happen to be wearing the same shirt. That's not even planned.
I know. Well, we did call each other this afternoon.
Yeah, that's true.
I was left out then.
No, the new low tide shirts from Striker this year, they've been super awesome. I liked even the high tide stuff last year, the swagger shirts. And I was talking with Mike about this, Mike Anselmo, because I used to hate long sleeve shirts. And I'm sure you heard me at St. Paul going, why can't we make this in a short sleeve? Because that's what I liked. But the cooling in these shirts and the high tide shirts has been like light years ahead of what I've had in the past. And it's awesome. It allowed me to actually wear long sleeves every day. So that I feel bad now for yelling him all those years, but he was secretly looking out for me.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I used to not be a big long sleeve shirt fan. And I think I don't know if I wore a t-shirt all last summer while I was fishing. I had the high tide last summer. And then like you said, I added the low tide. And then we have the Alpha Burr hoodie that I'm super excited to wear, because that thing feels like a refrigerator when it's sitting in my closet. So I can't imagine what it feels like when it gets a little wet.
Oh, it's going to be wonderful.
Yeah.
That's another great lineup they came out with this year.
Yeah.
That and the shorts, I believe, were a huge step up. The ones they came out with last year were awesome as well. They were really cool. But the ones this year I think they got a lot more features in there with the added pockets, the added venting. Those are going to be the ticket this summer, I feel like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the other things about these low tides too, keeping on kind of the trout theme, is that they have that veil camo, and if you can find it on YouTube. There's a really old In Fisherman TV segment about trout fishing, and there's guys out there in duck camo. They have their face painted, and they talk about like how trout, they're in such skinny water most of the time, and they can see, you always want to have the sun in your face because your shadow's behind you then. And they pick up on movement like that really well. And so having, the different color options, because this is would be one of my favorites, just because it is so versatile as far as being outside. But then you have the blue one and the green one if you're fishing more woods like you were talking about. And just being able to have that little bit of extra advantage on the trout is pretty sweet.
No, for sure. And I mean, I think that can go with about any fish. I know I kind of keep the same way with bass, even fishing when they're up super shallow, 1.5 feet less. It's the same way, sun in your face. The other thing I liked about these two, since we were talking about them, is that I put it on earlier without a hat and the hood was coming over my face. Like, the hood on these is huge, but when it comes to fishing super shallow and seeing bass cruise around or even trout, what's really awesome is when you have your sunglasses on, since it comes so far over, it keeps all the sun from coming in around your face and takes out any glare that you would possibly get. So that's another key feature on that I really liked.
Nice for our aqua view too.
Oh yeah, to see that screen, that's great. Yeah, I didn't even think about that yet, actually. I'm even still stuck back at Josh was admitting that he didn't wear a short sleeve shirt at all fishing the summer last year. But I even want to reiterate, because I never thought that I would see the day. And, sun protection has been huge for us, having to apply sunscreen, but then having to reapply. And it's just way too easy to forget. And even myself, I've known that I have freckles on my shoulders that I didn't used to have. That's probably not a good thing, shout out to dermatologists out there, but when you are able to have a long sleeve shirt on all day, and not just for the factor of sun protection, but actually to be more comfortable, that's one of those things that just keeps you more diligent as an angler, keeps you on the water a little bit longer and even a few more hook sets. So that's a really fun thing. And I've got to say, I'm a little bit jealous watching you guys both here in that shirt because literally all day yesterday, and I didn't even want to take it off. I was wearing the blue one. And it sounds silly to brag about a shirt, but when you have something that, I don't know, looks good on both of you, but is so comfortable, I mean, that's pretty awesome.
It is being comfortable out, whether you're walking streams or you're out on the boat. That's the biggest thing because no one wants to stay out fishing when they're hot and sweaty and sunburnt and uncomfortable. So taking those proper measures, whether it be long sleeve, wearing sunscreen, even hats are a huge thing. All of that, the more comfortable you are, the longer you'll stay out, more fun you'll have, and you can focus on your fishing. You hear, especially in bass fishing, like the professional level, they always talk about how mental it is. It really is easy to start missing bites when you get distracted by this, that, or the other. So anything to take those away is definitely a big help.
And then the other thing that I'm thinking about is these are perfect layers for under rain gear, and so we talk all the time about, our Striker rain gear. It keeps you out there. It's super breathable, but windproof. But let's imagine that you put a layer under that isn't breathable. That's something that affects the performance of your gear. So, when you have a great layer to go underneath your other great gear, that's something, again, that really puts you over the edge as far as, what other anglers might be dealing with.
No, I definitely agree. And I've always been a big one. It seems like every morning at takeoff, I've got a sweatshirt and my rain jacket on at least. Or my bibs. I don't know. I could live in my bibs until the sun comes up. They're so comfortable. But yeah, it's definitely a big thing because there's a lot of rain gear out there that doesn't breathe at all. And it is like wearing a wet sock all day. And it's not comfortable and another distraction like we talked about. But you're right. Yeah. If you're not layering up with something that has some breathing as well, or is a thin layer, it's going to get sweaty and sticky and you're not going to have a good time.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, I mean, I guess what are you hitting first? Are you going up for trout or is it going to be bass?
It's going to be bass, I think. I don't know. I could go out for trout this weekend. We'll have to see what happens. It's a fly by the wire kind of deal.
Yeah, that's for sure. And so for people at home that maybe want to follow you on your adventures, how do they do that?
I've got Instagram. It is PJ Rohlfishing. We can comment it in here at the end somewhere. That's about all I got. I'm not the most social media savvy person out there.
No, and that's okay. You know, you don't have to be, but you know, what I see of you on Facebook certainly is a lot of fun. And so I look forward to seeing about your spring and your summer fishing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it should be a good time. I'm excited for it. I'm hoping the weather turns around and we get some warm fronts moving in here and get some more bass moving up. Last weekend we went out and we caught I think we had 37 males or something. They were all shallow, just eating a rattle trap really good, but bigger ones weren't quite behind it yet. So I'm hoping a warm front will push them up here soon.
Awesome. And I know at some point that's going to happen here. That's for sure. Cool. Well, and thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us tonight.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And to the people at home, thank you as well for being here. We had a great time and looking forward to next week's edition of Hook, Line, and Striker.
Night, everybody.